Tara Brennan was 27 when everything began to fall apart. Last Thanksgiving, her father stood up in front of 30 relatives and scolded her like she was a stubborn child simply because she asked what her grandmother left her in the will. The laughter around the table felt like knives on her skin. Tara kept her face still, but inside her chest burned. Her father smirked and said, "Now you know your place." Tara whispered only one word back, "All right." The next morning when he came to gloat, he found her room empty. No clothes, no suitcase, no Tara. Before he could even react, the doorbell rang. The family lawyer, Mr. Howard, stood on the porch holding a small brown briefcase, breathing hard like he'd rushed there. Tara's father frowned. "What are you doing here?" Howard trembled as he answered, "Mr. Brennan, what have you done?" But the real truth had started months earlier, back in September on the day Tara's grandmother passed away. Tara was working in her tiny studio apartment when her mother called and said softly, "Tara, Grandma is gone." She drove to the hospital through Portland rain, her heart heavy and silent, knowing everything had changed. When she arrived, her father, Ray Brennan, stood in the hallway talking loudly on the phone about paperwork. Even on the morning his mother died, he wasn't grieving, he was calculating. Tara stood far away, holding a cup of vending machine coffee she never drank. Her brother, Greg, stood beside their father like a loyal assistant. Tara felt small, invisible, like she didn't belong to them. But she remembered the last thing her grandmother told her in the garden weeks earlier. "I've taken care of things, Tara. Trust me." At the time, Tara didn't understand. She only felt her grandmother's hand squeezing hers. The funeral was quiet and beautiful. White flowers everywhere and a polished wooden casket that reflected the light like glass. But even that day, Tara felt pushed aside. Her father talked during the eulogy about the Brennan legacy, and mentioned Greg's name again and again. He never said hers. Later at the reception, someone asked Tara about her job. Before she answered, her father cut in loudly, "She plants trees for rich people." A few people chuckled. Tara tried to walk away, but a silver-haired man stepped forward, shook her hand and whispered, "Your grandmother was proud of you. I'll be in touch." Then he disappeared. That evening at the family house, the long dining table was set like a royal banquet. Her father stood at the head and declared that he alone would manage everything Grandma left behind. His eyes drifted to Tara. "You don't need to worry about anything. Complicated things aren't your strength." Tara clenched her jaw. After dinner, she went upstairs to the bedroom she grew up in. There, inside her old nightstand, she found a cream envelope with her name written in shaky blue ink, her grandmother's handwriting. Her heart pounded as she opened it, not knowing it would change her life forever. Inside the envelope were two things: a letter written in her grandmother's strong, pressed handwriting and a partial photocopy of a legal document. The letter began, "Tara, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and your father is already doing what I feared." Tara's breath shook as she read. Her grandmother explained that she'd created a trust years earlier and named Tara the only beneficiary. "Your father won't accept this, so keep this letter hidden," she wrote. At the bottom, her grandmother added softly, "You are my builder, Tara. Don't let anyone tear you down." Tara held the letter to her chest and cried quietly. The next morning, Tara drove back to her tiny Portland apartment. Plants filled every window and papers covered her desk. It was the only place where she felt safe. She searched online for Howard Estate Attorney Portland, and the man from the funeral appeared instantly. His face was calm and steady. She hovered over the phone number but didn't call. Doubt whispered, "What if Grandma was confused? What if this is nothing?" Instead, she buried herself in work at the small landscape design firm where she earned just enough to pay her student loans. But the fear in her chest didn't leave. Then one morning as she checked her email, Tara froze. There was a forwarded message from her brother, Greg, clearly sent to her by accident. The subject line read, "Trust Amendment Draft." Her stomach twisted. She opened it and saw a chain of messages between Greg and her father. They were preparing a petition to change the trust beneficiary from Tara to Greg. The email claimed Tara was financially unstable and unfit to manage funds. At the bottom, Greg had added casually, "She won't fight it. She never fights anything." Tara stared at the screen, her hands shaking with something new, anger. 3 weeks passed. Tara worked long hours on a rooftop garden project, pretending everything was normal. But the email haunted her. When her mother called inviting her home for Thanksgiving, Tara said quietly, "I'll be there." She wasn't coming to mend anything. She was coming to stop something. The next morning she finally dialed Mr. Howard's number. His receptionist answered, then said, "He's been expecting your call." Within hours, Tara sat across from the lawyer in a small office lined with books. He opened a folder and said, "Your grandmother made an unchangeable trust. And she left it entirely to you." Mr. Howard slid the document across the desk. Thick paper. Notary seal. Tara's grandmother's signature at the bottom in strong blue ink. "This trust cannot be altered unless you agree," he said. "Your father has already tried to change it, but he has no legal ground." Tara felt her lungs finally fill with air. Then Howard added, "There's something more. Your grandmother also left you her cottage at the coast." Tara blinked. "The small beach house where her grandmother taught her how to plant flowers?" He nodded. "She wanted you protected. She planned every detail." For the first time Tara felt hope. They agreed on a plan. Mr. Howard would keep the original documents locked in his office safe, while Tara carried only notarized copies. "These alone are enough to confront him," he said gently. Tara inhaled deeply. "Thanksgiving," she said. "He wants everyone there." Howard studied her for a moment and replied, "Then that's when the truth will come out." The next day Tara packed a simple bag. One coat, one change of clothes, and the manila folder. Driving south through Oregon's quiet autumn hills, she whispered, "I'm ready, Grandma." But she wasn't sure if she believed it yet. When Tara arrived at the family house, her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "Your father, he's in a mood." Tara carried her bag upstairs, slid the manila folder under the mattress and stood by the window. The garden had grown wild since her grandmother's sickness. Seeing the dead flowers made her throat tighten. Downstairs, her father barely looked up when she entered the living room. Greg smirked at her coat and said, "Still driving that old car, huh, Tara?" She smiled faintly and said nothing. She had learned silence could be a shield. Her father, watching her, seemed irritated she didn't react. Thanksgiving morning arrived with noise and chaos. Relatives filled the house. Laughing, hugging, dropping bags, chasing kids. Tara helped in the kitchen because that was her lifelong role. The helper, never the guest. She chopped vegetables while her mother and Greg's wife chatted at the table. At 4 p.m. everyone sat for dinner. Tara was placed at the folding table with the younger cousins. Her father stood at the head of the main table and raised his glass. "This year our family grows stronger," he said loudly. "And I'm most proud of my son Greg for a big win in his career." Applause filled the room. Someone called out, "What about Tara?" But before she could answer, her father replied, "Tara is still finding her way. His creative." A wave of polite laughter circled the table. Tara sat still, hands folded. Only a small boy beside her whispered, "Are you okay?" She nodded gently. After dessert, her father stood again. "Tomorrow morning," he announced, "I'll make an important statement about Mom's estate. Everyone should be present." Tara felt her stomach twist. She knew exactly what he planned, to erase her publicly. She washed dishes alone while the family drank wine. Behind her, Greg leaned against the doorframe and said, "You should thank Dad for even letting you sit at the table." Tara continued scrubbing the roasting pan. Instead of anger, a strange calm filled her. She asked quietly without turning around, "Greg, do you know what Grandma left me?" The room behind her shifted in silence. Greg placed his wine glass on the counter and walked out without answering. 10 minutes later her father shouted, "Tara, get in here." She entered the living room where 30 relatives stared at her. Her father pointed at her like she was on trial. "How dare you threaten your brother? You are grounded until you apologize." Laughter exploded around the room. Tara stood still, face burning, then whispered one steady word, "All right." Tara walked upstairs slowly, ignoring the laughter echoing behind her. When she reached her old bedroom, she closed the door quietly and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she picked up her phone and called Mr. Howard. He answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," she said. "Bring the original documents tomorrow morning." Howard paused and replied, "I'll be there at 8. Tara set her alarm for 4 a.m., lay on the bed fully dressed, and listened as the laughter from downstairs faded into muffled noise. "Enjoy it," she whispered. It's the last time. She slipped out of the house at 4:15 a.m., her footsteps silent across the wooden floors. She carried her small bag and the manila folder inside her tote. Outside the air was cold and sharp. She didn't look back. She drove to a 24-hour diner and waited for daylight, sipping coffee she didn't drink. Around 7:45 she saw a text from Greg. "Where are you? Dad is looking for you." She ignored it. Back at the house, her father knocked on her bedroom door, expecting obedience. When he opened it and found the room empty, closet cleared, drawers empty, his confusion turned into anger. Her cousin Danny later told her how it happened. Her father came downstairs announcing, "Tara ran away in the night." Greg smirked and replied, "Well, that settles it." Her father nodded, satisfied, and began preparing for the estate announcement. But before he could finish his sentence, the doorbell rang. Tara's mother opened the door, and there stood Mr. Howard in a gray suit, holding a brown briefcase. His calm voice filled the doorway. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Brennan's estate. I need to speak with the entire family immediately." Conversations fell silent. People turned in their seats. Something was happening. Howard walked into the dining room with slow, deliberate steps, the way someone enters a courtroom. He placed his briefcase on the table and opened it. Tara's father rose from his chair. "You were not invited," he said sharply. "This is my home." Howard lifted his eyes. "This is the home your mother purchased with her own inheritance. And I am here because I have a legal duty to the rightful beneficiary." Tara's father snapped, "Tara has no rights here." Howard replied steadily, "She is the sole beneficiary of an unchangeable trust your mother created." A quiet gasp moved through the room. Her father's face tightened. "My mother was confused when she signed anything." Howard shook his head. "She was evaluated the same week. Her doctor confirmed she was fully competent." He lifted the original document with its red notary seal. "Your mother left everything to Tara." The room fell silent as relatives turned to stare at her father. Greg stood slowly, trying to sound calm. "Sir, any document can be contested." Howard looked at him carefully. "You drafted the fraudulent petition, didn't you?" Greg's face drained. A few relatives whispered. Others looked stunned. Tara wasn't there yet, but her truth was already shaking the room. Greg tried to recover, clearing his throat. "This is being taken out of context," he muttered. But Howard raised the printed email chain, the yellow highlight visible even from across the room. "These are your words," he said. "You and your father planned to remove Tara by claiming she was missing. You wrote, 'She won't fight it.'" Greg looked down at his shoes. Around the room, relatives shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Maggie crossed her arms and said loudly, "Let the man finish." Tara's father clenched his jaw hard enough that his cheeks twitched. For the first time he looked unsure. Then something cracked. Tara's father slammed his hand on the back of a dining chair. "You told me she'd never find out," he snapped at Greg. The room froze. Greg whispered, "I warned you this could backfire." The silence was so sharp it felt like glass. A wine glass slipped from Tara's father's hand and shattered on the floor. He tried to straighten himself and said in a forced calm, "Tara has always been irresponsible. I was trying to protect her." But no one looked convinced. Aunt Maggie shook her head slowly, disappointment etched deep on her face. Finally, Tara's mother stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried clearly. "Ray," she said softly, "you owe her an apology. You've owed her one for years." Tara's father stared at her as if she'd spoken another language. For a moment, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Then he turned away and muttered, "I will not be lectured in my own home." Without another word, he walked into his study and shut the door. The sound echoed through the dining room. Relatives looked at one another, unsure what to say or do. A long chapter in this family had just cracked open. After a few stunned seconds, people began moving. Some approached Greg, some approached Tara's mother, and some simply sat frozen in their chairs. Howard calmly packed the documents back into his briefcase. "I will file to remove Mr. Brennan as trustee on Monday," he said. "The trust will be protected." Danny stepped forward and said, "Tara was always stronger than this family realized." A few cousins nodded. Meanwhile, Greg gathered his laptop and walked briskly toward the door, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His wife slipped off the pearl necklace she'd been flaunting all weekend and tucked it quietly into her pocket. By the time the room settled again, the tension had changed shape. It was no longer fear. It was the beginning of truth. That afternoon, Howard filed the paperwork with the county court. Within days, Tara was confirmed as the sole beneficiary of her grandmother's trust. The house, the savings, and the cottage were legally hers. Her father didn't fight it. Even his own lawyer told him there was no chance of winning. When Tara signed the bank documents later that week, the trust officer told her, "Your grandmother planned everything carefully." Tara felt her eyes sting. "Yes," she whispered. "She really did." 2 weeks later, Tara drove back to the family house alone. Mr. Howard handed her a single brass key and said, "It's yours now." She stood on the front porch, the same porch her grandmother used to sweep every morning, and unlocked the door. The house felt strangely quiet without her father's heavy presence. Sunlight fell across the wooden floors. The smell of old books and lavender filled the air. Tara walked room to room. The living room where everyone laughed at her, the dining room where truth finally broke open, the study her father had treated like a throne. Now it belonged to her. She walked upstairs to her old bedroom. The twin bed was neatly made. The posters on the wall were faded. She touched the nightstand where her grandmother's letter had once waited for her and whispered, "I did it, Grandma." Then she stepped into the backyard. The garden was still overgrown and brown. Tara knelt and pressed her hands into the soil. "I'll fix everything," she murmured. "I promise." The truth settled inside her like warm light. She wasn't just inheriting money or property. She was inheriting her grandmother's trust, her faith, her belief that Tara could build something beautiful from broken places. A week after settling into the house, Tara drove to the small beach cottage her grandmother had loved so deeply. The ocean air met her at the door. Inside, everything felt untouched, as if her grandmother had stepped out only minutes earlier. On the table, Tara found a wooden box with photos of them through the years. Planting flowers, laughing in rain boots, walking along the shore. Beneath the photos was a short letter. "If you're reading this, Tara, you were brave enough. Start again here if you need to. I'm proud of you." Tara sat on the porch and cried softly, but this time the tears felt healing. Back in Portland, Tara turned her grandmother's old study into a bright workspace. She hung her drafting tools on the wall, set her plants on the window ledge, and placed her project files neatly on the shelves. She named her business Brennan Designs, partly to honor her grandmother and partly to rewrite what the Brennan name meant. Clients trickled in slowly, then more steadily. Danny visited to help with the garden. Her mother began calling regularly, each time a little braver, a little more honest. Tara didn't rush her. Healing, she'd learned, moved at its own slow, steady pace. Her father never apologized. Not once. He moved into a small apartment across town and told people different stories. Some blaming Tara, some blaming the lawyer, some blaming fate. Tara didn't chase the truth anymore. She didn't need his version. She had her own. Greg's law license was suspended for several months, and he shifted quietly into office consulting work. One morning he sent a short message, "I'm sorry." Tara read it, nodded to herself, and set the phone aside. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't always require a reply. Sometimes it simply required letting go of the weight she no longer needed to carry. Spring arrived in Portland with soft rain and new leaves. Tara spent early mornings kneeling in her grandmother's old garden, clearing dead stems, turning soil, and planting new life where everything had once felt abandoned. Every time she pressed her hands into the earth, she felt closer to the woman who had believed in her long before anyone else did. Her business grew quietly, one client at a time, and word began spreading that Tara created gardens that felt like peace itself. She didn't rush success. She simply built slowly, the way her grandmother once taught her. Root first, bloom later. One morning, Tara stepped outside and noticed an envelope on the porch. No stamp. No return address. Just her name written in familiar handwriting, her mother's. Inside was a single line, "I'm sorry I never stood up. I'm standing now." Tara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The letter felt like a small door opening in a wall she had spent years leaning against. That afternoon, her mother visited the house for the first time alone. They planted tulip bulbs together in quiet companionship. No big speeches. No forced apologies. Just two women trying finally to meet in the middle. Tara visited the beach cottage often. It became her refuge when the world felt too loud. She would sit on the porch with a cup of warm tea, watching waves slide over the sand, listening to the steady heartbeat of the ocean. Sometimes she brought her sketchbook. Sometimes she simply sat and breathed. The cottage didn't demand anything from her. It didn't ask her to be perfect or strong. It only offered space to think, to rest, to remember her grandmother's quiet voice saying, "You are enough, Tara. You always were." And slowly she began to believe it. Months passed and life found a new rhythm. Tara no longer checked her father's social media, no longer wondered what he told people, no longer replayed his cruel words. Some stories she realized were not worth keeping alive. One evening she stood in her completed garden at the Hawthorne house, the air sweet with blooming peonies. Danny stopped by and said, smiling, "Your grandmother would be proud." Tara looked around and whispered, "I hope so." The wind moved through the flowers as if answering her. She finally understood that family wasn't always the people who shared your blood. It was the people who chose to show up. One quiet morning, Tara walked through the house that was now fully hers. The living room washed in sunlight, the kitchen warm with the smell of fresh coffee, the studio filled with designs she once only dreamed of creating. She looked around and felt something she had chased her whole life but never caught until now. A deep, steady sense of belonging. She wasn't the quiet girl at the folding table anymore. She wasn't the daughter waiting for approval. She was a woman who rebuilt her life piece by piece. Tara closed the door gently behind her and smiled. For the first time in years she was finally home.